afternoon. Welcome back to another live episode of the Done Deal Show. I'm joined by the brilliant Rob Blanchett. How are you?
I'm good, Terry. It's a sunny day today here, so I'm looking out the window as I talk to you. It's quite nice to see some blue skies.
Yeah, listen, it is. It's nice. It's bank holiday. The kids have gone out with all their friends, and it's like their mum's taken them out with all their friends. They've gone to the beach. It's a very nice, quiet house. I'm doing this stream, and then I'm going to go in the garden for 4 or 5 hours and chill for the first time in months because there's no football on, which is great. But transfers, we're speaking backstage. I love transfer season. I love silly season, and I know that you've got a number of kind of updates and insights for us in and around Manchester United, which we're going to start on. We're going to move on to Chelsea and take a look at the Lukaku situation and other things surrounding that, and a little bit of Liverpool as well. Viewers, any questions that you've got, we've had Rob on before. You know, he'll answer what he knows. He'll give you opinions on other things. If he doesn't have an insight into a certain deal, he'll tell you that and be honest. He won't pretend that he knows everything about everything and everyone that's going on, because nobody does. But I suppose where a lot of people want to start is to do with Frenkie de Jong and the Timber deals, really. But Frenkie de Jong, there was a lot of posts put out yesterday sort of talking about Man United are expected or will put in a kind of official bid for him. What's the latest as far as you're aware in relation to Frenkie de Jong and Manchester United chasing him?
Manchester United will make an official bid for the player. There's no doubt about that now. They've received sufficient encouragement from Barcelona, and I think really this is what this deal comes down to. The bigger question, and as I was saying to you off there, Terry, before, is can you convince certain players that Manchester United are a serious project? Can you tell these players that they're not going to come to Man United and do what Juan Mata did when he came from Chelsea? And that is win a few tin pots here and there, but leave after 8-9 years and really kind of be considered a failure. So, you know, the Ten Hag era has begun. No doubt that these targets now are the genuine targets. United have been looking at them and investigating them. It's just now about finding out whether the player truly believes Man United are going to do what they say they're going to do.
And listen, I think there isn't a Man United fan worth their salt that isn't concerned about a decade of failure putting players off. Donny van der Beek is a prime example. The world at his feet when Manchester United signed him. I remember when we got him, it was a little bit of a bolt out the blue because there wasn't a lot of talk about us being linked to him. And then I remember it was a Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, and bang, it was there. He came in and he's barely kicked a ball. And I think if you're Frenkie de Jong, and I know we're going to get on to Torres Timber as well, but you've got to be considering that. The question I would ask you, you know, you're someone who said backstage, 25 transfer windows on the bounce now you've done. You've been in this industry a long, long time. I don't know about you. I've really seen the transfer approach and process change where it used to be get the club to accept the bid, then you work on the player. Typically now it's work on the player first, then go to the club. Do you feel that Ten Hag and United are confident Frenkie would agree to join if they can get to a resolution with Barcelona? Do you feel as though they have a sense of confidence there, or is it a bit of a mixed bag?
I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. And the reason for that is that when you look at Frenkie de Jong specifically, he doesn't want to leave Barcelona. It's as simple as that. Barcelona were shopping the player last January, and the price was actually much reduced than one being reported at the moment. So they are looking at moving on talent, and Frenkie de Jong kind of sits in that basket for them. However, Frenkie de Jong, I think Barcelona said, no, we're not doing any business for you. We don't want to move you on. And they've kind of hinted at that. They've said that half publicly, but Xavi's also talked about selling players he doesn't want to sell and that kind of vibe. It's very, very much up in the air. I do think that there's only one club in for Frenkie de Jong, seriously. That's Manchester United. That's the Ten Hag factor. I think that if he's going to leave Barcelona, it's going to be for a manager that he knows and a manager that he knows what he can do for him as well. So, still very, very kind of up in the air, I think, with de Jong. Does he want to play for Manchester United? I think if Barcelona say we don't want you anymore or we're going to sell you, then Manchester United will be his first destination.
That very much echoes a friend of mine who works in the football industry. He's not an agent, he's an intermediary, really. He was a lawyer, did a lot of work in that space, FA accredited lawyer, and he ended up becoming a bit of an intermediary. It's his job. It's what he does day to day now. And he's sort of said that exactly what you've said there. Ideally, Frenkie de Jong would like to stay. However, if Barca sell him and they say, we don't want you, you're someone that we're willing to cash in on, that is what's going to change the player's mind. Because what he's not going to do is sit there and stay at a club that he's not wanted at. He's not going to cause a problem in the dressing room. They're going to want to move him on, especially if, and it depends on the reports. A lot of pro-Barca fans are putting out these sort of obscure reports of new investment coming in, new this, new that. But nearly all the credible Spanish-based journalists are speaking about, they owe Gerard Piqué £50 million in deferred wages. They can't register Kessie or Christensen yet because they don't have the wage capacity to do it. And yes, Dembele's leaving. It looks like he isn't going to stay on at the football club. But that's just one. They need to sell more. And Frenkie de Jong's one of, they've got the Gavis and they've got Pedri. I think because they're born and bred, there's more of a want to keep them as an example. So it's really in an interesting place for Frenkie de Jong one. And rivals seem desperate for Man United not to get him. If he comes in, though, how successful do you think he'll be?
I think he kind of reminds me a little bit, even though stylistically very different players, a bit of the Paul Pogba situation. And that is you spent a lot of money on Paul Pogba, but he was never going to be the player that got you over the hump. He was going to be the player that would be part of the project that got you to where you wanted to be. And what did Manchester United do with their recruitment? They messed it up, didn't they, over the best part of 10 years? So I think we see Paul Pogba depart. If you bring in a Frenkie de Jong doesn't make you automatically Premier League contenders. He doesn't. You're going to have to do other stuff. There will be other players that need to come in all parts of the park, looking through there, Terry. So defence, midfield and attack. You're not just going to get away with it with one signing and maybe think you can run with that. I just think with De Jong, the good thing for him is that, and the good thing for Ten Hag, is that Ten Hag understands the player and knows how to get the best out of him. You look at the Donny van de Beek situation. The reason why Donny came to Man United is because he had a really long and frank conversation with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and he was convinced by the project. He thought, I'm going to come to England, I'm going to play, I'm going to be this number 10 role, United are going to play 4-3-3, and it's going to be great for me. Didn't quite work out. I do think that Ten Hag will be able to convince De Jong more about his plans than, say, Ed Woodward used to do, say, in years gone by for Manchester United.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just on this news, we've just gone live and this news has come out. The big investment that was linked to Barcelona from CVC, that has now been ruled out, coming from multiple press, including ESPN, that Barcelona decided to rule out the CVC agreement with La Liga and will opt to lower the salary of the squad. So again, this is something that, look, I'm trying not to get too excited about Man United as a United fan, because we've fouled so many times before when you're probably a little bit like me. When Pogba, Mkhitaryan, Bailly and Zlatan came in with Jose, we all thought we could be back with this. I don't want to do that again. But a lot of people have played down Man United getting De Jong because of the statements of, I'm happy here, this is my dream club, ignoring the fact that if Barca, it looks like they're doing it now, if they have to just sell so they can sign new players, he could be collateral damage, which opens up the door massively.
Yeah, well, you obviously mentioned the two young lads at Barcelona. Anyway, the big issue for them is that they've effectively given a contract to Kessie. So Kessie's going to turn up at Barcelona, and they can't register him at the moment because of FFP. How do you get around that? You have to lose wages. So I think this is why De Jong is being touted and was being touted all the way back in January. Is because he is a decent earner at Barcelona. He's a kind of player that I think if does well at Barcelona next year or two, they would have to give him a much bigger deal. Now, that in itself is an issue. You would think that players doing well is not a bad thing, but Barcelona and Real Madrid, they still have issues behind the scenes with their profit and their loss. So this is why this deal is real. This is why Manchester United are knocking on the door, because they understand that Barcelona are inviting offers. And Barcelona need to trim their squad. So I don't think they want to lose De Jong. He is a great talent. But there's every chance they know that they probably get top dollar for him this summer, and they'll be able to move their pieces around and formulate their squad for a good challenge in La Liga next season.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that PSG pulling away, there was loose links to City. They're seemingly not interested now. The door is there. And I think the Ten Hag approach is what can really work here. But now it's about Man United showing him we are operating differently. And I actually think getting him in very early in the window in itself is a sign. You know, our main signing has nearly always taken a year or two sometimes to get done, the majority of the summer. To get it in quick, to get it in over the line, and then move on to other targets, I think would be great. The other midfielder that's been mentioned and linked to the club primarily via yourself in recent days has been Ruben Neves. There's talks of an official bid for him. Would this be as well as Frenkie de Jong or instead of Frenkie de Jong, as far as you're aware?
Well, we understand that it's including Frenkie de Jong. So, you know, two separate deals at the end of the day for two midfielders. However, Man United have let three midfielders go in the last 24 hours. So there is this kind of pull towards strengthening the squad. When we look at Ruben Neves, he's a player that's been on United scouting reports now for well over 2 years. A player they've always liked at the football club from the actual core. Now, we know the scouting department's changed a lot at Manchester United. What we do know is that Wolves are preparing to sell. So this is kind of where we stand with that deal, is the sense that Neves does want to leave the club and is inviting himself offers from big clubs. He talked about Barcelona in recent days, and he has talked about Man United in the past. But if you're looking for a player who is Premier League ready at a price range that you can afford without worrying too much, Ruben Neves is absolutely perfect for Manchester United. So we do understand that United will make an offer for him now in the next few days. We'll see how that goes. Whether Wolves will play ball initially and say, yes, we want to sell quickly, we don't really know. That's something that I can't really comment on. But Wolves themselves are in the process of signing one or two midfielders, which would open the door for Neves to leave.
I think that's really encouraging for me because, again, everyone keeps throwing the word DM out. I don't know if that's the right. I look at Ruben Neves like a Michael Carrick style player. He plays in that holding role. He isn't a sort of a blood, sweat, and tears type player. He isn't going to be crunching into tackles and breaking up play. He'll be reading the game. He'll be anticipating where the ball's going to be. Now, he's not shy of a tackle. He'll get stuck in. He'll get involved. He's got good physicality, but his ability to control the tempo to pass the ball is great. And if Man United could pull off Frenkie de Jong and Ruben Neves, suddenly the upgrade from, and I'm going to exclude Pogba because he used to miss 2 to 3 months of every season anyway. To have that as the upgrade from McFred would be sensational. And I think one of the fears for Man United fans is very much, well, we get Frenkie de Jong in or we sign Ruben Neves and that's it. And one of them is partnered with McTominay for the entire season. So it looks as though that midfield overhaul is really being focused on by Ten Hag and John Myrtle.
Of course, and I think the big issues for Man United over the last year or two, and even go back well into the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer era, was that you had a lot of players in the squad on huge inflated wages. So that really kind of paralysed what you could do in the transfer market, even for a club the size of Man United. So I think when you look at Ruben Neves, what he brings to you is just all of that intelligence. Now, you just said there about a defensive midfield role. I get a lot of stick all the time when I always say that Man United don't need a defensive midfielder. But what do I mean by that? I mean that Man United need a modern number 6. That's what you need in the game. You need someone who can get the ball, intercept the ball, has good defensive numbers, but at the same time can pass it that way. And Man United haven't had that for so long. They just haven't. They bought Nemanja Matic to kind of do it at the back end of his career, but it wasn't the right fit, and it never has been. You know, now we ask Scott McTominay to be a ball player from number 6. What do you think is going to happen there, Terry? So I think with Neves, you know, Neves is a massive upgrade for you just in the centre of the park and just a Premier League player that is ready to go. And looking at around the £50 million mark, I said this is the starting valuation now for players. You're not going to get talent at 10, 15, 20 million and think they're automatic starters. Whereas I think someone like Neves, you know, he's ready to take that next step. And if he doesn't go to Man United, he will absolutely go to one of the big clubs.
Listen, I want him at Manchester. Ruben Neves, I've got a bias. You know, when I was working in my previous life in the banking industry, he was one of the first clients. Him, Jota, and Willy Bolly were the first 3 people I signed up. I got this new promotion. I got sent to my first lot of clients. It was those 3. So they'll always one, it was the first group of footballers I dealt with. Secondly, they were my first official onboarded clients. So I've got a soft spot for them. I want him to do well, and I've wanted Neves at Manchester United for a long time. I think another area that free kicks, long shots. Bruno's not bad, but I wouldn't say a specialist. Ruben Neves, for me, is. I actually think in a team that will be more offensive, more forward-thinking, he's a player that... It's funny is really when you look at free kicks, when you actually break down the stats, if you score 3 or 4 free kicks a season, that is like colossally good. If people forget that, like, the best free kick takers in the world average 3 or 4 a year. Neves has that ability in him as well. It gives us something extra that we haven't had for a while. Deliveries from wide positions as well, which means, as and when he drifts, you've got that. There's so many elements to him that I really like. Now, he doesn't maybe have the speed of other players like him. So he hasn't got the speed, for instance, and the athleticism of a Basuma, but he's equally as gifted technically. And I think that, I just think he'd be a colossal signing. And if we could bring both in, that would be very, very good for us as well. And viewers, listen, I want your take on that right now. I want you to give me a score out of 10. Midfield purchases this summer. If it was Frenkie de Jong and Ruben Neves, let's say these 2 official bids are accepted. What are you ranking that midfield out of 10? I want that in the comments now, people. I want your views and I want your opinions. Now, staying with Man United, Rob, defensively, Pau Torres, Irian Timber, both. I mean, I've spoke to 3 or 4 journalists. There are people close to Villarreal. Villarreal expect Man United to sign Pau Torres. There's talks of personal terms being agreed. Equally, United are reportedly in deep negotiations with Pau Torres. Is this one or the other? And if so, which one do you think United are more likely to put their eggs in the basket of?
No, definitely not one or the other. Both. I think they would like both players in the same way that they would like both Neves and De Jong, because they have multiple needs, don't they, in both defence, midfield, and extending the attack. I think that Pau Torres, as it stands, is the more likely. This deal goes back 12 months ago. Manchester United were very, very interested in him, obviously after the period when Villarreal beat them in the Europa League final. That then went very quiet. They obviously bought Varane. That slowed everything down. And Manchester United have rekindled that relationship with his representatives now. So I do think that, again, he will definitely leave Villarreal. Manchester United seems the most likely destination. It really depends on whether they get down to the crunch, Terry, and find that they're going to give Harry Maguire another go. So I think that this seems to be where we stand, is that they want to give Maguire another go and they want to see what he can do with Varane, but they're also very aware that they probably will move on maybe 1 or 2 other centre-backs, which means that they will have an opening there in the squad. What do? You strengthen all positions, don't you? That's what you try and do at the very least. And I think, again, looking at his price range of around 50 million, 55 million maybe, he's a very gettable target at the top end of his budget. So I think he's a really, really good player, left-sided player, very natural, can bring the ball out. Heard United fans criticise him for not being tough enough, not being strong enough. But I think the modern centre-back is all about technique rather than it is being all of this hot bluster of being this kind of strong specimen. It's more about ball retention and passing the ball out.
Yeah, Pau Torres is an interesting one. Again, I mean, I really like the idea of Timber. Going after both is ideal. I think Maguire is a big key factor in this. We saw Melissa Reddy's report the other day, excuse me, that suggested he's placing the team and his captaincy are under threat. Now, for me, if you take his captaincy, you've got to get rid of him. I just don't see him. I think it's going to be hard for him to recover his loss of confidence at the club, irrespective of his captaincy status. But if he's out of the first team because we signed Pau Torres, because Varane's playing, in my opinion, under Ten Hag. If he's out of the first team because of Pau Torres or Timber, and he loses his captaincy, I just don't see why you don't try and cash in on him and get some money back. And as we've said, invest that money into Pau. I mean, bring it. If you said to me now, Bailey leaves, Jones leaves, Maguire leaves, that means Pau Torres and Timber come in, and you promote for more regular game time. Mengi as an example.
Yeah.
I'm quite, again, as a United fan, I'm pretty happy with that. We've got rid of a bit of dead wood. We've got rid of I'm not even going to call Maguire a problem. I just don't personally see him. I'd love him to, by the way, recover, get back to his very best and be consistent in a United shirt. I just don't think if you take the captaincy away, I think it's all she wrote really on that. But it's intriguing that they're looking at both. But what I'm liking is they seem to be working on both deals. But what you've just said about the Timber is interesting, because the reports out of Holland today are he might pull away from Man United because he's unsure of regular first team football, which I suppose it begs the question. If he comes in, is he likely to, what are you hearing? Is it likely that Ten Hag wants him more than any other and will play him in his first team, or will it be a slow integration?
Well, first of all, any player that comes in, you cannot guarantee them first team football. You can't say to them, you're an automatic starter. What you can say to them is dangle the carrot and say, we would like you to be the first team starter, as long as you obviously hit your marks. I think the thing is with Timber is that his development has been fantastic in the Eredivisie. He's proved what a great player he is. He's played on the right. He can play central. The problem as it stands today is that Ajax are ready to match any wage offer that Manchester United give him. So
Wow.
I think that makes the player much more comfortable in his situation. And this is why people have been quoting what he said on international duty only a few days ago, where he kind of said Ajax are a big club and they play in the Champions League. So it was a bit like, So I know people put two and two together. That does not mean that Manchester United cannot sign this player. I think it just means it's more unlikely than, say, Pau Torres. Pau Torres is ready to move. He's ready for that next move. He wants to be in the Premier League. And the door's been open to Manchester United for over a year now, and United are revisiting that. Timber is a relatively new target. This is a Ten Hag target. Ten Hag wants the player. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I think, will almost definitely be shown the door this summer. I think there's a chance he'll go to Crystal Palace or potentially Roma. There's lots of interest abroad for him. And it means you're looking for a right back. Also, the whole thing with Dalot is up in the air. People say that his place is guaranteed. I do not believe that at all, not from what we're hearing. So United are looking for a right back. So if it isn't Timber, I still think they'll go and sign one with Pau Torres.
Yeah, it's an intriguing one indeed. It feels like the Pau Torres and Timber deals are both really close. And this is one of those moments where football fans have got to understand something. And I've been very privileged in the last few years to talk to a lot of journalists, and it's very likely that Man United are working on both deals. And then you end up, what's the word for it? You then make that way you've got two decisions to make from. You can, I can pick between the two of them. Now, I don't know if you've ever done this. I've done it with jobs. I've had two job offers on the table at the same time and then weighed up the pros and cons and picked one. I've continued to do the interviews for both. I've put all my effort into getting both. And then I've got two job offers, one with this bank, one with that bank. These are the packages. These are the pros and cons. And then you make your decision. I kind of like the way Man United are doing things of almost, there's two or three plates spinning at the same time. Get them to almost a full agreement. Now, Timber being the one that pulls away, maybe because of a lack of first-team football, is fair enough. And I tweeted it this morning that if he doesn't want to come to Man United and it doesn't feel that he's got the ability to force his way into the first team, then for me, that isn't a Man United player. And that isn't, I'm not talking technical ability. I want, whether it's Pau Torres, whether it's Frenkie de Jong, whether it's Darwin Nunez, if you come in and, we've had too many of those players that don't want to fight for their places. Anthony Martial is a prime example. When he was the main man, killed it. As soon as somebody came in to compete with him, shrinking violet. And I think that you need players that want to fight for their positions more than being guaranteed them. And that's not a dig at Jurrien Timber. He's obviously got his own motivations. I've got Champions League football. There's the World Cup coming up. I want to maintain my place in the squad. So I completely get it from his professional standpoint. But as a Man United fan talking, I want you to say, I don't care who's at the club. Watch, I'm going to be starting. Because if he comes in and plays well, he plays. There's Ten Hag's not going to keep. I don't think Ten Hag's going to make the same mistake as other managers where, I'm going to keep playing Maguire irrespective of how many mistakes he makes, how many times he gives the ball away, how many times he marks his own players or some of the silly things that he did. But it's certainly going to be an intriguing one to see how that kind of transpires and moves forward. Very quickly, finishing up Man United, Darwin Nunez. What's your understanding about the latest there?
Darwin Nunez was relatively close only about a week or two ago. I think, again, the understanding, you just said there you want players who want to come to Manchester United. Darwin Nunez wants to come to Manchester United. That's been made crystal clear. But he does have other offers on the table. There are other considerations. The big kind of X factor in this transfer window, especially for Man United targets this year, Terry, is Newcastle United. Newcastle United can literally look at the who's on the market and go for players and put together wage deals that we've never really seen before. Now, people say that FFP will affect that. I'm not so sure. I think that, again, when you've got a lot of money, you can move stuff around and create maybe investment or sponsorship that isn't particularly there at that moment of time. So Darwin Nunez, 100% will be playing in the Premier League next year. Where he'll be playing, that's still not 100% sure. And United are still burning away in terms of forwards. They're trying to sort out their midfield and their defence first. That's where a lot of the money will be going. But Darwin Nunez was their top attacking target and was almost very, very close over the line only a week or two ago.
Yeah, and listen, he's growing on me more and more, but that's because I'm feeling like he's a Man United player more and more. And no matter how much I try to stop, I have this proclivity to just back someone who suddenly wears the red of Man United and he looks close. We'll see what happens in that space. Viewers, make sure you're smashing the like button. Make sure you're subscribing to the Football Terrace. Let's get this past 500 likes while we're live. Now, I want to move on. We are going to talk Liverpool a little bit later, but I wanted to touch on Chelsea. the Lukaku story has been sort of swimming around all week. And the latest out of Italy is that he's agreed terms or personal terms will be no problem, whatever the catchphrase is this summer. It always changes. But he's sort of agreed to go back to Inter Milan if the deal can be reached. What's your understanding of the current Lukaku situation?
I don't think Romelu Lukaku will be at Chelsea next year. Not at all. And this goes back actually relatively now weeks and months in terms of the dialogue between the player, the club, and the manager. Of course, Chelsea have been in limbo, haven't they, in the last few weeks in terms of the ownership? But I think there's a very, very clear opinion here from maybe the coaching staff at Chelsea is that Romelu Lukaku does not fit what they need in this football team. He did actually end the season, I think, as Chelsea's top scorer, but yet is a complete and utter failure because he doesn't really give Tuchel what he needs. So Lukaku opened the door for a return to Inter Milan almost 3 months ago, and those conversations have been ongoing. They've been going on for quite a while. He wants to leave. Chelsea do not want the player. Inter are going to put the money up. I think he'll probably go back to Inter Milan for a significant pay cut. He really liked the lifestyle in Northern Italy. He liked being out there. He liked the league. It was a big success in Serie A. I think, again, that will get done now in the next few weeks.
I agree there's no place for him. When I heard, I think it was Dean on Monday, said that Lukaku has basically told Chelsea he's happy to stay if they change the style of play, it just made me chuckle. Managers like Thomas Tuchel do not change their style, their philosophy, their approach.
No.
For anyone, let alone a player who's been basically texting his ex or sending dick pics to his ex all season. Like, with all due respect, that's just the analogy for me. That's all he's been doing. He's been cheating on Chelsea all year. Why keep him? It makes no logical sense to do it at all. So I'm not surprised to see that. Who do you think Chelsea would look at to replace him? Because there's obviously talk of Dembele. Trending news today, Dembele's going to come. But he ain't a goal scorer either. I think he's never scored more than 12 goals in a season. So league goals. Who are Chelsea looking at to replace those goals, Rob?
It's difficult because it's about, what strikers are on the market and what are you looking for. Now, Chelsea went for Lukaku because they kind of got in their heads that they didn't have a number 9. And a lot of Chelsea fans still say it was like, we need a number 9. Well, you don't need a number 9. You need goal scorers. You need people that fit your attack. Think how Liverpool do it. Liverpool don't really have an out-and-out number 9, but they have 4 or 5 strikers, 4 or 5 forwards who'll score your goals. So that's really the Tuchel model. I think the guy on the top of everyone's wish list at the moment is Nkunku. So Nkunku's been named Player of the Season in Bundesliga. He's a centre forward. He can play wide. He can score goals. He's got everything. He's an absolute world-class talent ready to explode. But, of course, getting him out of Leipzig at the moment is really, really difficult. So almost impossible. Of course, Chelsea got fantastic links in the Bundesliga with the clubs out there. So they have those communications. But if they were going to look for a centre forward and look for a striker, someone that can do different things for them and score goals and fit the system, then I don't think you can get better than Nkunku at the moment. People are really high on Haaland because of what Haaland's done in the last 2 or 3 years, and they think he's going to be an automatic success at City. I don't believe that. I think it's going to be a tough transition for him. I did see your tweet earlier on, Terry, about him getting injuries, and I think that's prevalent. Like, he might be like Harry Kane and get 3-4 injuries a season. It might leave him out the picture. And Nkunku, absolutely fantastic player. Links with Manchester United as well. United have scouted him extensively. He could be a player, I think, that when he leaves Leipzig, he will go to one of the very big clubs in the Premier League. And I think Liverpool, who we're going to obviously talk about in a minute, might well have an extended interest in Nkunku for their attack.
Absolutely. And I mean, Chelsea have got a lot of work. A fair bit of work, just like Manchester United to do as well. Yeah. Jules Koundé, we all just know that's done. I mean, unless someone sweeps in with a record-breaking offer, with record-breaking wages for a player of that age, he's going to be a Chelsea player. I don't even think it's content that Chelsea fans even care to hear anymore. They just want to see the kind of the here we go style announcements, really. Who else is likely? I've seen, obviously, Dembele's name recently. Hakimi's been relinked to the club. Who are some of the names that you're hearing in your sort of world and your sort of contacts about incomings to Chelsea outside of the aforementioned?
Well, it's actually relatively quiet for Chelsea at the moment. I'm kind of surprised, but as I said, it's not completely surprising considering that they've not had an owner of the football club. So now they have an owner, and now they'll be able to push forward with some of these things. So, like you just said, I think it's a positional issue for Chelsea about how do you fix certain problems that have just arisen. You've just lost 2 defenders. You need to sort that out, and you need to sort that out really, really quickly. you're just about to lose your big earning centre forwards. And I really do think Lukaku is gone. I think that's done. So how do you remodel that? Do you go with someone like Timo Werner? Do you give the guys you've got already? You know, Kai Havertz playing as a false nine, as he did for a lot of the time last season. So I think with Chelsea, I'll be completely honest, it is relatively quiet in terms of the wider picture. Dembele's been linked. I'm not 1,000,000% about that. I think, again, there's something not right about that. It sounds a little bit more like hot air. It could be a case that I think London would be a destination that he would be interested in. But overall at Chelsea, I think it's more about moving these players out quickly now and being able to then find their targets. And then we'll actually see a little bit more action in West London.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and that kind of kickoff, as you say, it has been a little quiet, barring the usual suspects, especially in the midfield area, because Tchouaméni was the name that Chelsea fans were screaming. He'd gone to Real Madrid.
Yeah,
we kind of know Declan Rice is the guy for them. They want Declan Rice, but 120 million. West Ham are digging them heels in and saying, "Pay us or you don't get him." And it's just such an expensive deal. It's going to eat into the budget for other people, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and they've got to decide what they do with Kante. So the thing is with Kante is that at his very best, he's still one of the best central midfielders in the world, but he is suffering with injuries now and he is getting older. So he's now going into the last year of his deal. It really depends if Chelsea give him a new deal. I think you'll see the whole midfielder issue kind of move off the table. So you're saying that they want Declan Rice. They did inquire about Declan Rice several times over the last year or two. But they're not massively high on Declan. They're really not. I think there are other takers for Declan Rice above Chelsea. Declan Rice himself, former Chelsea graduate, would love to go back there, best friends with Mason Mount. But let's talk about whether Mason Mount will be at Chelsea long term. So these things are all very much up in the air at the moment as we go through this transfer window.
Yeah, it's intriguing that I've seen that the link. I've seen Man United recently linked to Mason Mount in terms of tracking him and the new deal and everything else. It's weird that because he's such a kind of polarizing player, Mason Mount. There's quite a lot of Chelsea fans that don't like the academy. Some love it and they praise it beyond belief. Others have got a real bone of contempt. But we get that with Man United now as well. Some people just don't like the hype around academy players, which I don't know. I suppose I'm old-fashioned, really, and sentimental. So I like a romance story of a player coming through the ranks from the age of 10, becoming your star player, but not for everybody, I suppose. Viewers, brilliant work on the likes so far, but Facebook is ahead of YouTube again. 2 days running. Facebook currently on 372 likes. YouTube currently on 256. YouTube, get yourself caught up. You can't get beat. I know my Facebook people are cool, but it's basically old men and old women are beating you young'uns. Like no one young on Facebook anymore. My age and older are on there watching it. Thank you to everyone. A lot of them are my friends, by the way. I keep seeing the comments come in here from friends of mine I went to school with. But do your business, YouTube, and get that like button smashed. On Liverpool, Mane exit. Salah reportedly, I mean, it comes from James Pearce. You trust it. He's telling Liverpool, I'll join a rival if it lets you pay me more money. Doesn't seem, they didn't get Tchouaméni. They went for Mbappe, according to him, and didn't get him. It's not been a great start to the summer so far for Liverpool, or has it?
No, it hasn't been. And I think when you think the way that they actually ended the season, it's left them a little bit in flux. So I said at Christmas last year, and this was from direct sourcing from the player, that Mohamed Salah would not be at Liverpool long term. I didn't think that he'd sign a new deal. There's no doubt that his dream now is to go to La Liga and finish off his career and prove that he's a generational talent. Always a player who loved Spanish football. Connections, obviously, with Real Madrid and Barcelona. It's always been a kind of dream of his. And he's at the situation now with Liverpool where he's won everything. He's done everything in the Premier League. He's proved himself. And he's coming to the end of his career and looking for that big last contract. When I say end of his career, I'm not saying he's 35 years old, but this is when players decide that they've got one or two huge deals left in them. Now, with Mane, again, we knew at Christmas that Mane was edging out the door. It was all went a bit quiet, but Mane had kind of made it known that he didn't really think that he'd be at Liverpool a long time and that it was time to move. It was long before any link to Bayern Munich. And I think with Salah now, Liverpool are at a crossroads where they have to decide to either sell this player, because he's come out and said, I'm going to see my contract out. I think that was more of a message to the Liverpool board to say, I don't care if you sell me or not. I'm going to see my contract out and then I'll go where I want to go. But Jurgen Klopp has to decide, does he push that button now? Because it would be a big change, wouldn't it, Terry? You know, to get rid of two of your real top stars who've got you, you know, the Champions League, the Premier League, two of the best players in the world. It could be a really tough couple of months of transition for Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. It really, really could be. I think that I got an interesting response from a Liverpool fan yesterday who kind of said to me, "We shouldn't." There's a percentage of Liverpool fans that will say we shouldn't pay the big wages. We let them go, and we go again. And I don't. There's nothing wrong with that approach. That approach just says, well, you could go another 4 years and win just one league title. And I say just one league title. This is big Liverpool Football Club. This is, I've heard Liverpool fans this week talk about we may not have won. We may have only got one Champions League and one Premier League in the past 5 seasons, but we're still a great side. And I think, hang on, though. Over a 9-year period, Bob Paisley won 6 league titles. Bob Paisley won 3 Champions Leagues, I think 4 League Cups, FA Cup finals, Community Shields, Super Cups. I think he might have even won a Cup Winners' Cup in that time as well. That's a great team. Based on your own history, this Liverpool team plays great football. Klopp is a world-class manager. You've got a brilliant team. But the word great, maybe they are great, and there's a better word for that Paisley team, legendary. But I'm not saying don't be excited, don't be happy. I'm not saying throw your toys out the pram and scream and shout and have protests. But there's this element of you can't let your standards of Liverpool fans drop to say, well, one league and one Champions League makes this as a great side. You've had other teams that are great in your history that have done so much more. It's about the trophies. And we know Liverpool fans care about the trophies. They walk around showing 6 fingers all the time. They walk around rightfully celebrating they have more trophies than anybody else. But yet when it comes to this Liverpool team, suddenly trophies don't matter. It's all about points totals and how they nearly did things. And I bring that back round to the transfers. Because if Mane goes and Salah leaves, yeah, they might come again and go out and buy some up-and-coming players and develop them. But doing that 2 times on the bounce is almost unheard of. Even Fergie, as great as he was, he developed lots of great young players from the class of 92. Of course, he bought Rooney and Ronaldo really young. He still went out and bought established top-class players to complement the development of people to keep them winning. You know, he could have gone, do you know what? I'm not going to buy another midfielder or another striker. I'm just going to keep developing these young players. He might have won the league still, but it might take him 2 more seasons to get those players up. And I think that Liverpool fans have to demand their club gets this right, because City have just gone and signed Haaland and they're going to get Kukurea, and there's reports of a midfield player coming in as well. I did actually see Declan Rice linked to them. If they sign those 3 players, which City have got the money to, they'll just create another sponsor, have a PO box somewhere. If they have the money for that, I don't even mean it really. Liverpool, you're not winning the league. And historically speaking, if you're not winning those titles, your team, I'm not saying they'll be forgotten, but they won't be remembered in the same way. And I think Liverpool have got the money. I think FFG have got the money. They've got to dig their hands in their pockets and either give these guys these deals, or you go out and buy top quality to replace them. That otherwise, you're going to not fall behind. Is maybe like hyperbolic, because they're not going to suddenly start coming 5th and 6th, but they're not winning the league titles. And surely that's what a team with Liverpool's pedigree and history have got to be aiming for all the time.
Maybe, but maybe not. You know, let's compare Liverpool to Manchester United, because I think there is a parallel there. You know, the 2 teams that have dominated English football consistently over the last, 100 years almost. You know, you go back over time with their spells of true dominance. I think when you go back to the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and obviously for Man United, of course, those years were laden with trophies, fantastic achievements, top players, amazing teams. But I think kind of comparing that to now, it is a different game and a different set of circumstances in terms of the business ethics of these football clubs. Liverpool proved, I think, in the 90s that you can have top players and still not win. Man United have proved in the last 10 years that you can make massive signings, 1.25 billion on players, and not win. What's most important is having the correct project. So I think for Liverpool fans, it's not defending the fans of kind of that ethos of what they were saying. But I think when you lost Coutinho, people thought, is this the end of Liverpool? This is their best player. You know, they're going to sell Coutinho. He's going to go to Barcelona. He'll rip it up. Barcelona will be the best team in the world. And Coutinho's on incredible money, and Liverpool going to hit a brick wall. And what did Liverpool do? They got better. So I think that if you lose Salah and Mane, incredibly difficult players to replace. But do you give them the big fat contract that maybe makes them a little bit more docile and maybe less effective because they're sat on those big wages and, winning doesn't really matter as much then? That's a difficult question, Terry. Man United have seen this over and over again. Someone gets a contract, they don't become useful. Aubameyang at Arsenal, big contract, goes on holiday. So I think that this is where the modern game is different. I don't think we should be comparing to previous regimes and going back 20, 30 years because it's almost like two different sports. It really is. You talked about Bob Paisley, always going to be a Liverpool legend. I think what Klopp has done in the last 5 or 6 years has been revolutionary. It's taken a very, failing system at Liverpool and been able to fix it. Guardiola kind of jumped into a City team where they had tons of money but just needed reorganising. He didn't have a lot to do. They bought the players. They've won all these titles. Ten Hag now is coming to United. The history doesn't matter, Terry. What you used to be good at doesn't mean anything. Trebles and all of this do not mean anything. What does matter is that this year Liverpool did compete for the quadruple and they did fail. Thankfully, we're all very happy as Man United fans that happened. We can't pretend that. But ultimately, every year it's about starting afresh and making sure that you are competitive. And I don't think Liverpool should be paying Salah and Mane, world record fees and wages to keep them at the football club when they're now in their late 20s, nearly 30s, because it's the end of their careers, really. You've got Diaz, you've got Jota. Go and find your next big thing. Go and get him for 20, 30, 40 million. Go and get Nkunku for 50, 60 million, and he'll score you 100 goals in 150 games. And suddenly you've forgotten who Mane was. You've forgotten who Salah was. It's all gone out the window. So I think that's more the way to look at it.
And Rob, I think a great point and great challenge in there. And listen, and if Liverpool do that and it goes right for them, I totally get it, and they've got to do it. And I still think they've got to go big, and I don't mean world record breaking big. Well, as I said, they have broke records in the past. They broke the centre back record, they broke the goalkeeper record. They're still going to have to go out there and spend on top quality players. There's always going to be more of a premium for Liverpool doing that now because the whole Moneyball effect. Well, I always look at it this way now. If I was a manager of Hull and they suddenly wanted one of my fullbacks now, I'd be like, well, we're not letting them go for 8 million. This is Liverpool. We know what they do. Suddenly, there's you're going to whack the price up, so there's going to be an extra cost for Liverpool. Equally, though, I understand why Mane and Salah want the money because Liverpool fans have been pitching them off as potential Ballon d'Or winners all year. Well, pay me like a Ballon d'Or winner then. So I get it from both sides. And this is where we see Liverpool make their decisions. And if they get it right, and as you say, Mane leaves, Salah leaves, and they bring in Nkunku, they've already got Luis Diaz, they signed a Jard Bowen, I'm just throwing that name out there because he's linked, and they suddenly they come again, and they're just as competitive, then great. My only kind of thought is, I know they've got a lot of money, but is that going to be enough to win those titles against Man City? I'm not too sure. And, there's a lot of people agreeing with you in the comments. Winnerpool here says, I agree, Terry. FFG must be bold if they want to beat this City side. And I believe that Klopp was promised something when he extended his contract. You get a lot of others that are agreeing with yourself, saying, thank you, Rob, for bringing logic to this channel. Well, what this channel does do is bring a difference of opinion. There's no echo chambers here. Terry, aka Tony Blair. Oh, I mean, I do vote Labour, but Blair's too conservative Labour for me. He's not real Labour as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to go too far the other way either. Do you know what I mean? But there we go. What do people think? What do you think Liverpool should do? In terms of players they're linked to, I mean, you mentioned Nkunku. If Mane leaves, is it more of a central player you think they would go for? Because you've got Luis Diaz, you've got Mo Salah, or is it unsure really? Because Liverpool are very hard to get kind of transfer news out of.
Okay, the world of the number 9 is dead. I say this all the time, and it does not mean that you don't have strikers in your team. It just means more about the setup and the tactical push. How do you where do you put your team in a box? How do you make yourself win? City, on one hand, have decided that they could not turn down the chance to get Haaland. That deal was in the making for a year. They've gone that direction. Haaland will be put at the top of the attack and everyone else will buzz around him and work around him and they'll try and make that work. I think when you look at Klopp and what he does, Klopp's not suddenly going to, I think, change his own philosophy to bring in a centre forward or a striker who just plays the 9. He's going to look for a player who's a little bit like Nkunku. Now, there was also links with Darwin Nunez at one point because Darwin Nunez can come from the left. He can play left and centre. He's not maybe the most technical player. I think that's where he maybe falls down a little bit. But he certainly can give you goals. He can get in the box. He can do really, really good things for you. So I think for Liverpool, it's an existential question now about the future, about how do you set your team up to win. And if you lose Mane and you lose Salah, you're absolutely not going to be able to replace them like for like. You're just not. And the thing is, in 12 months' time, Terry, 100% Salah will not be playing for Liverpool. And we definitely know that Mane won't play for Liverpool in the next few weeks. So I think Liverpool need to make these decisions yesterday. And I think they already are. And it's about maybe either being patient and looking at the market and seeing what happens and seeing, where can you go and get a steal? If Nkunku suddenly goes into a bidding war, which I think is more likely what will happen because there are several teams who want him, then I think Liverpool will stay out of that. It's not really up for their business model. I know FSG quite well. FSG will not spend over the odds to keep the team at the very top. They're actually closer to the Glazers than they are to maybe other business models, certainly more the oil clubs. Like you can call Chelsea an oil club as well, I think, at one stage with Abramovich. So they've got money to burn in a different way with different objectives. FSG run their team like a business and they will continue to run their team like a business. They will be looking for the next Luis Diaz. They'll be looking for the next Jota. They're not going to be looking for the next Salah at the top of the market. They'll be looking for someone that they can create and become a star. Like Man United used to do, you create stars, you don't buy them. That's actually the best financial practice you can put forward.
Yeah, I mean, Luis Diaz came in at 37 million, I think rising to about 50 million pounds. So that's the kind of price, again, everything's gone up. Mo Salahs and Mane's are being signed for 25 to 30 millions. Yeah. They're now having to pay more nearer the 50 million pounds for these players in totality. Remy here says, Terry, to me, you must realize that Liverpool have a philosophy that works for us. Your ideas are antiquated, to say with respect. And of course, you can challenge me. Listen, I'm really not precious. I don't finish the stream and cry. I don't necessarily think my thoughts are antiquated. I'm talking, when I speak of greatness, I still believe, I look back through history and my view is always, to surpass the greatness of Man United's treble-winning team, you look at that block of 5 or 6 years, and you've got to outdo their achievements. I still believe in that. The same as sprinting is different now to what it was 30 years ago, but you've got to beat the world record to be the best. You can't say a sprinter is the greatest sprinter of all time if they don't win a gold medal at the Olympics and they don't break the world record. I still have those views. However, what I agree with you on, and I totally get where Rob was coming from, is Liverpool operate in a very different way. And you said a philosophy there that works for us. Not all Liverpool fans like it. I still think what Liverpool's philosophy has to do, and the Luis Diaz deal is a sign of that, and I just mentioned it. Yes, you were signing a lot of players, 20, 25, 30 millions. Occasionally, you'd go a little bit higher. The needles move now because you're at the top end of the spectrum, and there'll be a higher premium from clubs that you're buying from. And equally, sometimes you'll need to get some players that are a little bit further along the line than they are right now. You did that with Alisson, you did that with Van Dijk, and you've got to do some more of the same. I think there's got to be a slight adaptation for you to keep up with Man City, because surely the philosophy is to win those league titles and Champions Leagues and not just be in the race. But it's going to be intriguing to see what happens. And of course, Carvalho's come into the football club at Liverpool. There's talks of Gavi maybe coming in as well from Barca with these financial issues. It's going to be very exciting summer. And I think Liverpool are going to, we've been through it as United fans. I remember when Ince and Mark Hughes left and it was, what's going to happen? That went all right. So, and they were brilliant players back then. So it's going to be a very intriguing time indeed to see what happens. Viewers, keep hitting that like button for us. Just under 400 likes now, which is amazing. Over 1,700 people watching live, which is great. We have a super chat here, Rob, that says, Terry, can you ask Rob, about Bastoni to Spurs? Do you see that happening?
Not necessarily. It says everything Inter needs to sell players to get Lukaku or potentially Dybala. That's not kind of what we understand with Inter. There are things that they need to sort out in terms of contracts to be able to balance their books. I think Spurs are going to be an interesting player now in the weeks ahead about how they're building. So obviously they've brought Perisic to the club. I think they might try and do it a little bit more under a tighter budget. So I think in terms of the way they're still in a situation where they're paying for new stadium costs and all sorts of other things around the football club. And that's been, I think, Conte's big maybe beef with Daniel Levy when he came to the team and was about, in terms about transfers. I do think you're going to see 4 or 5 new players at Spurs. I think Bastoni potentially, again, I think the Conte factor is really important in the same way that the Ten Hag factor is really important for Man United. Will these managers be at these clubs long term? That could be the reason why a player comes to a football club.
Yeah, and it's really intriguing. I think I've said this to a few people the last few days. Everyone has got to still calm down a little bit. And I spoke to you, Ben, a few times, Dean. I'm texting journalists on a regular basis. At the moment, there's a lot of groundwork happening. There's a lot of plates being spun. Let's see what happens. Some teams don't even want to jump straight away because I give an example. Man United went for Pau Torres last. I know our season was poor. If we'd have signed Pau Torres as soon as the window opened, we wouldn't have got Rafael Varane, who I think now with Ten Hag and his system could really shine at the football club. We waited. Yeah. That opportunity arose, and suddenly there was this new opportunity. Frenkie de Jong's a prime example. Because this opportunity might take a little bit longer to get done, but it's kind of presented itself because of a problem at Barca rather than him being available. So maybe Spurs won't rush into every single deal in the first few weeks. Footy Chat says, big up Terry. I don't even know why I'm going to ask this, even though I know the answer. But is there any news on Arsenal transfers?
No, there isn't really a lot at the moment game with Arsenal. I think that they're coming out the back of a season where I think they've had decent success, but yet they finished the campaign being called failures. So it's a really difficult one for Arsenal because they do want to push on. They will make signings. There's no doubt about that. But again, they've got plates spinning. You think Aubameyang leaving the football club freed up a lot of money in terms of their future budgeting. They've got to see what they do with Lacazette. They've got to see what happens with Nketiah. Obviously, Nketiah is just a player in terms of whether they give him a contract or not, or whether he stays or goes. Still waiting to kind of see the do's and don'ts of that deals. But I do think with Arsenal is that I think out of all of those clubs in London, that they're closest to the title. I think they're closer than Chelsea and Tottenham. They just need to kind of get 2 or 3 signings that make them more consistent and relevant every week of the Premier League season. So no, at the moment, there isn't a lot of news, very, very quiet there. And I think they're one of those clubs that are just waiting to see what happens.
There's no doubt. I think with Arsenal, yes, just trying to get their ducks in a row, work out what's going on. I also say to a lot of people, it is only the 2nd of June. There is a mini international tournament on right now in the Nations League, which will slow things down because teams are still away. And although the world's practically gone back to normal, there's still things like COVID and people don't want to, cross, they don't want people running across borders and shooting off for medical. They want to kind of keep people in close like that. Then there's going to be the holidays of the players. And I think what the market's really looking at right now is 2 or 3 big transactions to go through to kind of kickstart it as well, if that makes sense. And a lot of people thought Mbappe maybe was going to be that, but because he stayed, it's kind of slowed that down a little bit. So there's kind of lots riding on that. There's some more breaking news regarding Frenkie de Jong, people. This has been tweeted out by a journalist from Marca called Carmen Torres. The United Plug have shared this. I'm just checking it is the proper United Plug aggregator, who have said that Barcelona have reportedly put Frenkie de Jong on the market. Now, again, I don't know if there's actually there's not really... I remember I learned this when I was about 19. There isn't, when you play a football manager game, there's an actual transfer market with all the listed players. There doesn't actually exist, people. There isn't like a database where the clubs do that, but it just makes it just reads to me more like Barca are having to sell him.
yeah. He's not. Look, he's not been transfer listed, because if you transfer list him, that would trigger a load of contractual issues and mean that they would have to pay the player more to sever his deal. So he's not been transfer listed. But we do 100% know that Barcelona are shopping him, which means that they are talking to clubs and saying, if you put this deal on the table, this is what we're looking for, this is our valuation, then we will go ahead and we'll be willing to do business with you. So that's really not new news. I think in terms of case of De Jong, he's aware of that as a player as well. He knows that Barcelona, if they get the offer they want, then he'll be off. But I think he would absolutely much rather be in Catalonia next year than Manchester.
I hear that completely. Rob, we know what you're talking about backstage. Someone's done it here. Where's it gone? I need to find it. When you said there's no transfer news on Arsenal, Reece says, is Rob taking the piss basically out of Arsenal? No, he's just telling you what the facts are right now.
No, not at all. I think Arsenal, I've just, I complimented them in the same breath, didn't I? I think that Arsenal are more ready to win than maybe all of the other London clubs. They do need to make additions, but I think they're doing the right thing with Arteta. They've got youth. That should be the core. You just said there that you're old school and that you kind of look at youth and that's how it should be. I'm the same. I think that you need to build from those parameters upwards from your foundations. So Arsenal shouldn't be just jumping into, finding their next Pepe. What would be the point? You've proved that you spend 75 million on a player that doesn't help you. Don't buy a Pepe. Go and let your youth dictate what you do. So Arsenal do maybe need another centre-back, maybe need another full-back, maybe another midfielder. Should you be relying on Xhaka? Probably not. So those are the things I think that Arteta and the board need to discuss now in the next few weeks. And you're right as well, Terry, early days in the transfer window.
Absolutely. Nav here says, I think Liverpool will drop if some leaves like Barca, but not to that extent. Build a team around him. When he goes, you can replace him. How will it go? We'll rely heavily on Mo, not the team. Look, Nav, I get where you're coming from. And listen, I think as rivals, everybody wants Liverpool to drop off. But they've got a world-class manager. I don't think they'll drop off hugely. I'm talking fine margin to whether or not their decisions will make them win a league title. And I think there's a lot of polarization and sort of binary thinking in football. When I say I don't know if Liverpool can catch City if they don't do X, some people equate that to, are you saying they're going to become crap? No, I don't think those words left my mouth. I just think it's getting those decisions right so they can bridge the gap, which of course is the target of Liverpool Football Club. They're going to go about it differently from Man City. Let's just see whether or not that works. But of course, Nav's entitled to his opinion to think they will fall away. Somebody here keeps asking about Koundé. We touched on that already. Looks almost set to be done anytime now. Feels fairly imminent when you look at the majority of the news. So no real updates on that whatsoever, because the news is just what it is. Neeks here is a contributor to the Terrace. Of course, everyone knows him. Says, as a rider to the Frenkie de Jong news, Barcelona decided to rule out the CVC agreement with La Liga and will opt to lower their wage bill. We already touched on that, Neeks. I bet I've only just joined us. Thank you very much. And yeah, look, it is what it is. I'm more intrigued. I know it's kind of treading over old ground again, but I think I'm more intrigued now to see what this does for the mindset of Frenkie de Jong, because I think sometimes people forget how professional footballers are. And I learned this where I would sit with them, or I'd ring them up and say, look, we've got to come and do something banking-wise. When are you free? And it's, I've got work until 3. And I'm like, work? Oh, yeah, I've got to go into work. Oh, training? Yeah, I've got work. They would refer to training as work. They'd refer to games as work. Yeah. And that was always a moment for me where I realized this is actually someone's job. It isn't just, and I do this. I don't ever say I'm going to play on YouTube. I'm going to stream. I'm going to work. So I suppose it's the same difference, really. So it's going to be very intriguing to see what this does to his mindset.
Yeah, look, I can. I won't name him, but I know a footballer who played for Manchester United in the glory years under Sir Alex Ferguson and did incredibly well, won lots of trophies at Manchester United. And he will openly tell you that football's not his first sport, doesn't really enjoy it. He's just very good at it. So this happens, it's a professional question, isn't it? And I think I tweeted earlier on as well about it and saying what Man United need to do, specifically in all football clubs, is you target players who are professional and will work hard. It is their job. They get up in the morning just like all of us and they're bleary-eyed, and some days they feel like it and sometimes they don't. But of course, you're under an incredible spotlight, earning incredible money. So it's more important, I think, to have a good set of professionals in your squad than maybe just saying that you've got a player that loves the game or loves the club and all of that. That's not really the modern game. But even going back 20 years ago under Fergie, there were several players who played football because they were good at football rather than they actually loved the game.
Well, you had that recently, didn't you? With, you'd see Paul Pogba dance after he scored a goal. Oh, it's terrible. Yeah, hang on. I remember Sharpie and Giggsy dancing on the pitch. They had like a weird patter cake type celebration they did, and it's always happened. It's just every now and then a certain player gets targeted and hated upon because they're doing it, and generally that's in an era where we're not winning. If Man United had been winning league titles and Champions League in this last 9 years, no one would have cared what colour hair Pogba had. Nobody would have cared what Lingard was saying on Twitter, like YouTube or Twitter. No one would care about Rashford doing the MP stuff. It's only because we're failing that we're focusing on these areas that maybe, just maybe, are complete red herrings. You know, they're absolutely nothing to do why we've been bad at all.
Yeah, it's easy to play into fan paranoia, you know, so fans can look at something and say, that's why it doesn't work. You know, Paul Pogba, I think it's a classic scenario of a player come to Man United, big fee, big expectations, and the team fails. So they point the finger at the kind of most obvious target. You actually look at Paul Pogba's metrics; they're so much better than people give him credit for, which is bizarre. You know, in terms of things like running stats, people say he's lazy. He runs 9.9 kilometers a game. That's on the Premier League average. So he's not actually lazy or not doing the job. And it's interesting, isn't it? You can go on to your blue in the face with some of these players. Marcus Rashford is now experiencing that. Where 2 years ago, people are a little bit more, oh, Marcus, you're playing with injuries. We love you. Now it's Marcus, you're out of form. Why are you feeding the children? So there's a kind of balancing act there, isn't it? Of trying to make sure that you win. And I think that's where Man United needs to get it right now.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's agendas run deep when people are in pain, you know, and that's why one of the things I'm most excited about under Ten Hag is going to be if and when he picks players that everybody expects to go.
Yeah.
So there's players I want to see leave, but if he's picking them and starting them, I'm going to give them a chance under him. I'm not just going to sit there and run the same agenda because it's tiring for me. But as you'll know, you're involved on social media as well as being a professional journalist, that some people's only commodity, and by the way, there's some journalists that are like this, some broadcasters and TV pundits that are like this, some radio presenters that are like it. Their only real commodity is being controversial. And without it, I've always grew up as a big fan of Adrian Durham because he made me laugh. But if you remove these controversial moments, there's not much else there. It's just a man talking. Do you know what I mean? But he was brilliant because every day he would have a take that would infuriate some group of people listening to the show. And I think that become more and more of a thing, if that made sense. Like Roy Keane, when he says things, it's almost, I'm not stupid enough to think that they're completely all your thoughts, that it's not slightly rehearsed, if that makes sense. Or there's a little bit of a bit of rehearsal that goes into a bit of an idea, a little bit of, I'm going to say, because sometimes he says things and I can, when you watch a really good comedy and you can see the comedians in the sitcom, their lips are almost going because they're trying to hold in the laughter. It feels a little bit like that sometimes. Like, do you really mean that? Or are you saying that because you know it's going to go viral?
Yeah, well, I've worked in production for 10 years as well. And you've always got to remember with pundits and presenters, they've got this little thing in their ear here where they communicate with the production team. And quite often what you see at that moment of time on camera is pre-practice, is staged and is triggered. So quite often that you'll see someone come out with their hot take on, say, on Paul Pogba or someone like that in the past. But why are they talking about Paul Pogba? Does that come out of their brain, or is that actually what the script is? So quite often in football punditry, pundits do say what they feel and what they think, but a lot of it is done in production meetings beforehand. What players will we focus on? Why are we focusing on them? What's going to get the hits and the clicks? That's just how it is in television in general, and also in radios. No doubt about it. You just said Adrian Durham there. Adrian's an intelligent guy, says lots of really good stuff, but also does the hot takes, because it's the hot takes that do get the reactions.
Well, he did the Daily Arsenal. When I used to listen to it, the reason I've stopped listening to it mainly is because I'm working all the time now, and when the shows are on, I'm working. But I used to listen to, he used to do the Daily Arsenal, and he was doing the Daily Arsenal and putting Arsenal down ever before we'd heard the names of Troops and Lee Gunner and Claude, God rest his soul, who started, again, going at Arsenal, going at Wenger, and talking about how badly run the club is. Adrian Durham was doing this ever before we ever heard of them. It was hilarious because some of it was a little wild, but then there's a lot of it that now you look back, you think he was so right. Like, it's unbelievable how right he was. But that's a fun part of football. There's a few friends of mine that run fan channels, and they pride it on, there's no hot takes. There's no hyperbolic nature. There's no big opinions. It's all just kind of very bland and middle of the road and nice. And that's why no one watches them. I said to him, what? No one's going to watch it. And it isn't because we want someone to come on and lie on camera, but we want a little bit of fun. We want a bit of entertainment. And, there's a few journalists out there now that every time they talk about any club in the transfer window, they're just positive about everyone and everything. And it's like, but that's just not reality. Someone's doing a bad job here. Someone's doing a bad job. Tell us. You've got all this insight, all these agents, all these clubs. But there we go.
It's totally. Look, I do it. Well, obviously, my two shows are the Masterclass and the Promised Land. We try and steer away from the gossipy side of it. The Masterclass is more about tactics and about players and how they fit into our teams, and especially obviously Manchester United, of course. And the Promised Land is more about being a fan. I'm still a fan of Manchester United, even though I work in the industry. I still go to games. I still feel it inside here, like we all do. When you lose, it's not a good feeling. However, when you win, it's the best feeling in the world. So it's having that balance. I think with the fan channels as well, some of them get it right and some of them don't get it right. Sometimes they lean too far one way and they're just talking a lot of hot air. And then sometimes on the other side, they're not really giving fans what they want. So it's a balancing act.
Exactly the word there. It's all about balance. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. Rob, always a pleasure to talk. Thank you for the insight. Thank you for the updates. Viewers, I appreciate all your support on the Terrace today. I really, really do. I'm checking I haven't missed any super chats. Oh, there is one I missed. Sorry. It says that they still will be challenging Liverpool. There's just not going to be, it's going to be a lot harder to keep up with City. That's what I meant. The replacement would be interesting if the players leave. Nav,
Terry, they might be better. Like, this is the scary thing. They might go and get players and make them even better. That's the way it goes.
They could be. They absolutely could be. Viewers, though, thank you for tuning in. Hit the like button before you leave. Subscribe before you leave. Fan channel review show out later today. Make sure you're tuning in. Until next time, take care. Goodbye. God bless.